Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Koro More Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Toma bina ke dayalu jagata samsare Toma bina Toma bina ke dayalu jagata samsare Toma bina Patita pavana etu Daya Vatara Patita Tababata Patita pavana etu Tababatara Patita pavana Musamo patita Prabhu Napaibeara Musamo pati Musamo patita Prabhu Napaibeara Musamo pati Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhe Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhe Prabhu Kipa bolo kana koro ami boro duke Kripa bolo kana koro ami boro duke Daya koro sitapati Advaita Gosa Daya koro sitapati Advaita Gosa Taba kripa bole pai Chaitanya Nitai Taba kripa bole pai Chaitanya Nitai Swaru Sanatana Ruparaguna Swarup Sana. Swarup Sanatana Ruparaguna Sanatana Bata Yuga Se Jiva Prabhu Lokanata Bata Yuga Se Jiva Prabhu Lokanata Bata Yuga Daya Koro Sirachaya Prabhu Sinibasa Daya Koro Daya Koro Sirachaya Prabhu Sinibasa Daya Koro Ramachandra Sange Magana Rotamodasa Ramachandra Sangha Magana Rotamodasa Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitago Haribo, 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 Nitago Haribo. Nitaigo Haribo, 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 Nitago Haribo. Jayam Vishnu Paramansa Parividakracharya Sutasara Sishimad. Hesi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. Jayam Vishnu Paramahansa Parividakracharya Sutasara Sishimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki. Adanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki. Namacharya Slaridas Thakur ki. Prem se kao Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki. Vrindavan Dham ki. Mahaprabhu Dham ki. Dwaka Dham ki. Jagannatha Dham ki. Ganga Maya Nama ki. Tashi Devi ki. Bhakti Devi ki, Sri Nitya Gaurachanda ki, Sri Krishna Balaram ki, Sri Radha Shamasunda ki, Harinam Sankirtan ki, Samavita Bhakti Vrinda ki, Nitya Gopimanande. All glory to the Sami devotees. All glory to the Sami devotees. All glory to the Sami devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru Gauranga. Om Agyanati Mendasya Ganaganan Salakaya Chaksun Sumlita Yena Tasma Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobishta Stapita Yena Bhutale Sanyarupa Kadama Yadadati Swapadantika Vandeha Sri Guru Sritam Parakamalan Sri Guru Vaishnavascha Sri Rupa Sakajatva Sagana Raghunatha Vitanta Sajivan Sadhuitam Savadutam Parijanam Saitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Deva Sri Radha Krishna Parasagana Lalita Sri Vishakavitam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Panamami Hari Priye Vanchaka Paturubhya Chakripa Shundi Beva Chapati Tanam Pavana Vibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Namamo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesa Sunya Vadi Pashtadeshtarani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Anandadila Maya Vigraya Mabada Vichavisundaraya Tasma Maha Primarasa Pradaya Chitanya Yonamana Mastuti. So I thank everyone for being here this evening. This is every Sunday there is the reading of Srila Prabhupada's biography. It's also called Lilamrita, so that we can get some glimpse into the life of Srila Prabhupada. And of course, the pure devotees, their life is not limited. What they've come to execute in terms of Krishna consciousness for the benefit of humanity, there is no limit to that. Even though we may try to describe the activities, we may write certain books, still, there is never any ending to it. After all, Krishna's activity is unlimited. So because Krishna's activity is unlimited, similarly, the activities of his pure devotees are also unlimited. That is something we have to know. And also another thing we have to know is that their life, their activities is not ordinary. It's not mandated by the material energy. So we should never take the pure devotees of Krishna to be just like us. So Srila Prabhupada's biography, Lilamrita, there have been so many books written on the life of Srila Prabhupada. Many books have been written by different devotees, and many books are continue to be written. Because after all, Srila Prabhupada had thousands of disciples, and each of those disciples have a particular experience of Prabhupada. So each one have tried to recollect, to write down their particular memories, their particular recollections, their particular interactions of Srila Prabhupada. And of course, this book, Lilamrita, this is the official ISKCON Srila Prabhupada's biography. This is the official, this is the first one that was written in ISKCON. I remember this is volume 1. This one first came out in 1981, which is called Lifetime in Preparation. That was the title. It's called Lifetime in Preparation. And then the second volume came out shortly after that, called the Planting the Seed. So the first volume, Lifetime in Preparation, basically describes Srila Prabhupada's early life before he came to America. Because we only know Prabhupada only when he came to America. That before he came to America, so devotees, they've, by coming to India, they've gathered they gathered a lot of information about Srila Prabhupada's early life, his education, his the meeting of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and also his initial preaching in India. So there's a continuation of reading. I will continue reading, and then I will give some explanations of some of those points. So I think they've been reading before. This is page 216. When Srila Prabhupada was in New Delhi that time, he was alone, and he was trying to preach Krishna consciousness. So this episode describes how Srila Prabhupada, how he started the Back to Godhead magazine. He started Back to Godhead magazine, whereby he communicated the message of Krishna consciousness. And he printed Back to Godhead magazine. He wrote the article himself, and then printed it, and now he had to distribute them. So Prabhupada was going, especially to the coffee house, where so many people gathered. So Prabhupada will try to distribute the Back to Godhead magazine. But it wasn't easy. This was in the 60s, in the early 60s, around 61, like that. It was a tough time. So I just read something here. So this from page 16. According to the Shastras, the current age, Kali Yuga, will create continual degradation in society. And Abai could see this evidenced every day in Delhi. Delhi, formerly known as Hastinapur, had been the ancient capital of King Yudhishthira, who 5,000 years ago, before, under the patronage of Lord Krishna, had been the most opulent king in the world, and whose citizens had been fully protected and provided for. Now, after 1,000 years of foreign subjugation, India was again independent, and New Delhi was the capital. So the story is there, the history is there. Of course, you all know that India previously was ruling the whole world one time. Before 1,000 years ago, before the Greek came, India was ruling the world, and the capital of the whole world was New Delhi, Indraprastha or Hastinapur. So that time, 5,000 years ago, there was only one king, one kingdom. There was only one empire, the whole world. That is Bharatvarsa. Bharatvarsa actually covered the whole world, not just this present geographical area known as India. The whole world was previously known as Bharatvarsa, and it's ruled from New Delhi. But when the Kali Yuga began, 5,000 years ago, after the departure of Lord Krishna and his devotees, especially the Pandavas, so things start changing. Because as Kali Yuga begins, the degradation of the age begin to manifest. So eventually, the kingdom of India, Bharatvarsa, was reducing. The kingdom was reducing to the extent that by the year 1000 AD, the whole Bharatvarsa had been run over by the foreigners. First by the Greek, and then the Islamic rules came, the Mughals they came, they ruled India for about 800 years, and then the British came So the British came around 1600 or so. So they ruled India for almost 300 years. And while those people are ruling India, they also left behind, they give their particular, their so-called culture, so-called British culture. And then of course, in 1947, India got its independence from India. So the capital remains in New Delhi. And now it so happened that when India, they got their independence from British, let's say, but they still remain, they still hold on to British culture, which means the culture of drinking tea, meat eating, so many things like that. Even up to today, the Western culture is very much valued in India. The ancient, which is very rich, ancient Indian culture, very rich, is looked down upon right here in India. You're looked down upon. So this is some of the things that Srila Prabhupada had to deal with when he began his preaching in New Delhi. That people, they've given up their culture. People have given up their culture. Of course, not everyone, of course, because the Vaishnava culture is there, the Vedic culture is there, but it's there in a very limited way. In a very limited way, the Vedic culture. So, I mentioned here, yet even in Abai's relatively brief 60 years of experience, he had seen Indian culture, which in his childhood had retained much of the original purity of the Vedic age, degrade. Things have come down. Now, he saw a society in which his countrymen were victimized by the propaganda that they could be happy in gross materialistic indulgence. The British had introduced tea, tobacco, meat, and factories. And now, even after independence, these were a part of India's new way of life. Having driven away the British, India drove away the British from India, but the Indians were imitating Western ways, and India's leaders were deliberately ignoring the Vedic principles of God consciousness. The very measures, the very treasures India was meant to distribute to the whole world. Abai had seen how India had abandoned our spiritual heritage and gone running after the modernization of the West. But now, where was the material advancement? Were Indians any happier in their independence than they had been in British days? To Abai, the overpopulated city was a hell of ruffians and fools. Although thousands of poor people were employed in the burgeoning steel mills and rice factories and tire factories, their living conditions had worsened. Because previously, Indian culture is based on Vedic simple life. Simple life, which is basically village life. People live in the villages. Everyone has got a land. Every family has got a land, cows. So people live in simplicity, and everyone is basically happy. Everyone was happy because they live a simple life, a simplicity. But this culture was polluted when the Westerners, when they came to India, and they introduced their particular culture of factories, and they introduced factories, so many bad habits, tobacco, tea, all these things, meat eating. This is what introduced, and it became like if you smoked a cigarette, it's considered to be civilized. I remember when I was growing up in Africa, when we were in school, that, it's like to be seen as modernized, you have to smoke cigarette. To be seen as modernized, you have to smoke cigarettes or drink beer. If you're able to drink beer and smoke cigarette, you are seen as modernized. Say, oh, now you are cool. That's life. Is it? But it's madness. Because all these things, we know for sure that the more you engage in all these things, the more unhappy you become. The more unhappy you become, but through the false notion, everyone is made to feel that, oh, doing this thing make you so-called modernized, make you happy, So the factories become a symbol of modernization, having factories. Having factories, people, they left their villages. Millions and millions of people left their villages, they all come to the city to work in the factories. They come to the city to work in the factories, and these factories, what they are nothing but very hellish conditions. They're hellish conditions. Because millions and millions of people, they come to the cities, they have no place to live. So the people have to live in a very cramped up places or slums, just so that they live there so they can go in the morning, they go to work in the factories so they can earn some little bit of money either to send home or to maintain themselves. This is the situation. So, as mentioned here, that the many people who had come to the cities, their life was not better off than they were before. Their life was not better off. But through false advertising, people think, oh, this is good, this is good. Just like nowadays, you go into the cities like, Delhi, Bombay, all the big metro cities. You see all these advertisements. You see all these billboards, hoardings, whereby they display almost naked women, models. They display them advertising cigarettes, some fashion or some beers. They display advertising Pepsi, or that, oh, this is good for you. So people think, oh, this is good, this is life, this is good. And then they have to work very hard because they have to work in the factories so that they can buy all these things. So in this way, people's intelligence become very polluted in this way. But there is no happiness. There is no happiness. So this is what Prabhupada had to deal with. This is what he had to contend with when he came to the city, when he came to Delhi to try to preach Krishna consciousness. This is what he had to deal with. It's mentioned here, Abai, because he kept saying Abai because that was his previous name. Abai voiced his concern about these conditions in his back to Godhead. This narration is before Prabhupada took sannyas. This narration. So Srila Prabhupada was writing about all these deplorable Kali Yuga conditions in his Back to Godhead magazine. Like if you see the early editions of Back to Godhead, Prabhupada started Back to Godhead in 1944. In 1944, the first edition of Back to Godhead came out. And this is what Prabhupada was writing about. So, it mentioned here, could the poor eat the nuts and bolts produced in the factories? Could they be nourished by cinema, television, or sex songs on the radio? The leaders were unable to see that abandoning spiritual principles had led to the very ills they officially abhorred. A decadent, rebellious youth, corruption in every area of civic life, and even economic instability and scarcity. When Abai had been a youth in Calcutta, there had been no cinema billboards advertising lurid sexual fantasies. But now, India had developed the third largest movie industry in the world, and film advertisements were all over Delhi. Beef shops and liquor shops had sprung up. The newspapers regularly ran editorials deploring the degradation of young Indian boys who teased, insulted, and affronted women on the street. Women's leagues complained about increased juvenile promiscuity and the obscene treatment of women in films and advertisements. But there were no upright brahmanas or saintly administrators to do anything about it. So this was the situation around 60, 70 years ago. But it's the same situation today. The same situation is today. As a matter of fact, the way the situation was 60, 70 years ago is much worse today. It's much, much worse. There's so much degradation that is going on. Many, many years ago, 70 years ago, it was difficult to see women not dressed properly on the street. But nowadays, in all the cities, young women, they are dressing very provocatively. Young women. I'm not talking of those, I'm talking of here in India, metro cities. This you will see every day, especially places like Bombay or the high-class area of Delhi You will see all these things. So this is the situation. Because people's intelligence had been robbed. People's brain had been robbed of good sense. People had no spiritual guide in their lives. There's no moral guide in people's life. So, and this is why Prabhupada, when he started this Back to Godhead magazine, he felt like a spiritual need, that the need is there. So that's why the motto of Back to Godhead is light, nations is darkness. This is the motto of Back to Godhead magazine. There's Godhead and then there's nations. Godhead means the spiritual kingdom, means the spiritual world. And nations is this material world, which is a place of darkness. So there's nations is there, nations is darkness, and Godhead is light. But we belong there, we don't belong here, we belong to that place. We belong to the spiritual world. We are not a member of this material world. But because of illusion, we think that we are here. We think we belong to this material world. So therefore, we have to struggle with the material existence. So we have to struggle with material existence. So the pure devotees of Krishna, they find the ways and means to address this. So Srila Prabhupada started the Back to Godhead magazine, because his spiritual master had instructed him to preach in the English language. Now, in the publication, after the Back to Godhead was published, printed, now Srila Prabhupada find that going to the city, you find the distribution very, very difficult. If you go to many places, especially the coffee houses, trying to distribute it Back to Godhead magazine. This magazine is not an ordinary magazine. But people, they have no interest. They have no time. They have no interest. People have no interest in spiritual message. Because everyone wants to enjoy their body. Everyone thinks that they are this material body, and this material body is meant to be enjoyed. This is everyone's mentality. So when you tell them that you are not this material body, this material world is not your home, this material world is a place of suffering, and issue, don't try to enjoy yourself due to illusion, trying to get out. But people, they have no interest. They have no, it's like, they will tell you, what do you mean? This one is not meant for enjoyment. They will tell you, what do you mean by that? They will argue with you that, of course, this world is meant for enjoyment. This world is meant to be enjoyed. They will argue with you. But you can ask any sane person, any sane person that, what are you really enjoying in this world? What are you enjoying? What is the enjoyment? What are you enjoying? Smoke, tea, illicit sex. Where's the enjoyment that you have to struggle so much for? You have to struggle so much. For every little bit of little gratification in this world, you have to struggle so much for it to get it. So where's the enjoyment? And whatever kind of enjoyment you may get, it's all temporary anyway. You get something, it gives some little bit of happiness now. And then in a moment, that happiness is going away. And then you have to look for it again. Again and again and again and again and again. So, but people, they don't want to listen to spiritual message. So this problem that Srila Prabhupada faced when he was trying to distribute the Back to Godhead magazine, when he began Back to Godhead magazine. So it's, the article continues. Abai saw the need for a spiritualization of society. But society was rushing headlong in the opposite direction. In February, even as Abai was trying to publish his Back to Godhead magazine, Prime Minister Nehru, while speaking with concern of India's crisis of the spirit, simultaneously launched another 5-year plan for rapid industrialization. Everyone, from the Prime Minister down to the common man, was concerned about the symptomatic problems. But no one seemed to understand that the real problem was the lack of God consciousness. So the government was busy planning about how to better people's life. But they are doing it in a materialistic way. Like every 5 years, there's always some kind of economic plan that this is what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And this 5 years is always based on industrialization, more industries. This is always based on that, in the industrialization of the society. This is what we're going to do for the next 5 years, more industries, so that more people can come out of their village and come and work in these factories. And these factories are nothing but hellish environment for the humanity. So, but when a pure devotee tried to tell the government that, look, the real need for the society is spirituality. That spirituality is the real need for the society, but the government, they have no interest. They are not interested. They have no interest. It's like, no, we have to feed the people. And how do we feed the people? We have to create more industries and all that. We do this, then we can feed the people. So anyway, this is the situation. I just read one more paragraph. Abai had to deliver the medicine for the ills of Kali Yuga. He knew it was indeed on a much larger scale than he could reach on his own. But even to administer one issue back to Godhead was almost beyond his means. Writing the articles, typing them, taking them to the printer, and distributing them should not have been the work of one lone, impoverished devotee. But in working with his god brothers, he had met with their decided lack of organization and their lack of desire for vigorous preaching. Bhaktisaranga Goswami had seemed determined to keep Sajjana Toshini small, and his math, like so many others, had been ineffectual in attracting new members. This was the petty-mindedness that would cripple preaching. Therefore, he was now working alone on a much small scale, happy in his spiritual welfare work, yet aware that his 4-page newspaper was only a drop of water in the desert. So when Srila Prabhupada began Back to Godhead magazine, normally to publish any kind of publication, you need a lot of teamwork. For example, I'm a publisher of books, and our book publication we have a team of writers, we have a team of editors, typewriters, designers. They're not to talk of finding the printers, all these things. And when all this is said and done, when the book is finally published and printed, then you need someone to distribute them. You need someone to distribute them. So it's a lot of people involved. But in the beginning, it's like Prabhupada was doing everything alone. Everything was doing alone. He was doing the writing himself. He will write the articles. Then after writing the articles, he will typing them, then proofread them, bind them, take them to the printers, have them printed, bind them, and then distribute it himself. So he was doing everything all alone. So you can just imagine such a task. So, but Srila Prabhupada was not discouraged because he knew that, yes, this needs to be done. You know, eventually this message will be accepted by somebody. So he was not discouraged the least, but in the beginning was very, very difficult in the beginning. So we can see from that time to today, Krishna consciousness movement, it has gone through a long incarnation of a long stages. From the time when Prabhupada started alone, he was wandering in Delhi, to the time when the movement actually went to America, and then eventually came back to India till what we are having today is not an ordinary thing. So therefore, we remain ever grateful to Srila Prabhupada. So I'm going to stop here. So thank you for listening. Srila Prabhupada ki. So I stop here.